How did your high school crush turn out as an adult? Story 1. My wife's former crush randomly messaged her on Facebook one day. She F him on day 2. She's now my ex-wife, she's jobless living with his mum, and I have the kids. My kids are 5 and 3, so they don't understand it much, but I'm hoping for the long game when they realize which parent was really there for them. My son still says hurtful things at times like, I don't want to live with you anymore, I want to live with mummy when he's angry. Story 2. My only girlfriend in high school was my crush. Her mum banned her from dating me after about a year because my girlfriend admitted to her mum that we were fooling around. This was about 20 years ago. She's still living with her mum, no kids, and as far as I know never again dated seriously after her mum broke us up. Still has the same job from high school too. It's like her mum went way into protective overdrive and my former girlfriend never grew up. Story 3. Overdosed and died last year. I got to see him before he was taken off life support with a really good mutual friend we shared organ donor too. It was surreal seeing him dwarfed by all these machines. He had one of the largest hearts I've ever come across. Graduated back in the early 2000s and last year 2019. Story 4. Still a 10 for looks. I'm sure she kept on as the amazing, kind person she is. She moved to another country, speaks multiple languages and is more successful than I imagined. She seems happy, but we haven't talked since the time I told her how I felt about her about 20 years ago. Story 5. Went on to be a teenage model for hair products, graduated from Yale, toured Europe, opened her own successful ceramics company that is sold worldwide and is often written up in magazines. Makes me feel like shit every time I think of her. Story 6. I was a freshman and had a crush on a senior. To add to it, she was a cheerleader and her brother played QB for the football team and got a college scholarship. She showed up at a football game a couple of years later with a baby in tow. She's married now and back in her hometown. That's about all I know. Story 7. She's still hot, successful and wealthy entrepreneur and married someone with the same first name as me and who quit his job to brew beer. I crushed on her for a bit, didn't think she was interested so I dated others, then come to find out she crushed on me senior year. I was too dumb and blind. We connected freshman year of college. She wrote me letters. And by the time I whisked up she had moved on. No one to blame but myself. Story 8. Found her on Tinder. She said I was hot. Pointed out that I was that loser she used to know in high school. Had a big laugh. Been a little over a year. Now we send each other memes and hang out occasionally when the pandemic ISND being a bitch. Story 9. She worked with the Obama administration. I forgot in what capacity, got married to some politician's son. Don't remember, don't care to look up. She is happy and that's the only thing that matters. Oh, she was also our school's valedictorian. She was so busy with her job she could not organize your high school reunion, so that's a plus. I wasn't head over heels for her, I admired her, but I knew I wasn't for her. Then there's another crush of mine. We ran into each other years after graduation at grocery store. After talking I asked her out to dinner at my house. I pull out all the stops, I buy rainbow trout fillets and make all the fixings. 6:30 rolls around, I open the door and who the hell is this man behind her? Oh, this is my fiance. She tells neglected to tell me about me. Turns out they wanted to sell me on some MLM thing. She tried to cross the threshold. I put my arm out and asked them politely to leave. I turned away from the door and had my saddest meal I ever ate. Story 10. There was a girl I really admired for a while. She didn't really give me the time of day after freshman year though. She was CO valedictorian and hugged me as I crossed the stage at graduation, and no one else got one. I'm still really confused about that 6 years later. She went on to med school and is either married or at least engaged to a guy she met there. Overall, she's doing really well and I'm happy for her. Story 11. I had 3. 1 from the first 2 years and 2 from the last 2. The first one is now F2M trans, who walked to Colorado to join a cult or commune. He is now in Arizona recording rap albums. The second girl moved to Florida and lives in a swamp. She periodically hits me up to tell me she misses me, how dumb I was that I didn't follow through, that we should get married. The third was a missionary. She wasn't really into it once she grew up, came back home and I introduced her to one of my closest friends. They've been married for 15 years.
Story 12.
They both ended up as great guys. One has a huge family and is a minister. The other only has 1 child and is a college professor. Both married nice people and are happy. They were really good guys in high school and ended up being really good adults. I've got both of them on Facebook and we keep in touch peripherally as we stayed friends over the years. Story 13. I remember walking up to her and asking if we could talk in private, and she said you can say what you need in front of everyone her group of friends were all around. So I asked if she wanted to go on a date. She burst out laughing and said, yeah, no, shit was rough, man. Story 14. I had several. One of them is still a close friend, and he became a primary care doctor. He also officiated my wedding. I have no idea what happened to another one. We didn't really have overlapping friend groups, and she doesn't do social media. One of them is a math professor now, so that's pretty cool. My biggest crush in high school was my longtime neighbor, but it also fizzled out pretty quickly after we went to homecoming together. We're still good friends, and our families still keep in touch. He's also the guy who introduced me to my husband. Story 15. Very well. He joined the military and served for a number of years, was in after Vietnam and out before the Gulf War. So I'm not sure if he actually saw much active duty and then settled in Korea where he trained in Taekwondo and did a lot of professional fighting and won a lot of awards, attained the rank of Grand Master and returned to the US and opened a very successful school that specializes in TKD and Hapkido, has opened additional locations and is currently looking to open one in our old hometown. I imagine that will happen post-COVID. Story 16. I had a few in high school. One ended up moving away after sophomore year and no one knew why. She reached out to me when I had a mental breakdown online and said that she could understand what I was going through. Some F-up shit happened to her, though she never said what specifically. I didn't ask further because it wasn't my business to pry. I'm not sure how she is now. Another got super hot after high school and she did a degree in science. Again, not sure where she is now, but I think she doing all right. And the third works at a bank. We ended on bad terms, partially my fault. I found out she was making fun of me behind my back and had done so for months beforehand, so I sent her an angry M. Story 17. She was aware then, over 30 years ago, but it was unrequited. We've been in casual contact through Facebook for the past several years, and once before that my wife at the time, and I had her and her husband over for dinner. From what I can tell, she's grown into a person I probably would have been happy with. It's nice to see my high school perspective got a few things right. I think we'd be good friends if we lived closer. She appears to be living a good life with her husband and family. With my second wife, I'm happier than I could have ever imagined. Life worked out well. Story 18. Back when I was younger and crushing hard, I got on AOL Instant Messenger and had gotten my crush's screen name from a friend. I worked up the nerve to start a conversation with him, and soon after some awkward small talk, he sent me a message in Comic Sans, black background, red lettering, and in French. I then went to Google for translation and found out he had just called me a pig in French. Being a seemingly awkward and chubby teenager, I was literally crushed. The heartbreak was only made worse by remembering that a few weeks prior I had selected to take French class the next year and couldn't change it. Years later now that I've blossomed, he follows me on every social media platform, has reached out a couple of times to try and flirt or hang out. Hard pass. I believe he's moved away and is a teacher now. Story 19. One is still active duty in the military and she has a very successful career as an officer. I hope she continues to be. The other is successful in the arts and I hope she continues to be that as well. Both are married to others who treat them well. I'm happy that they are both happy. My life is still going good here, so I have no hard feelings.
Story 20.
He had a roller coaster of a life. I admire him more than ever, and more than most people I know, but can't wrap my head around why I ever found him physically attractive. Maybe it was always just his heart. By age 25, he had a PhD, a wife, and was a captain in the Navy. By 30, he had 2 PhDs, a small business where he made a metricus ton of money, and his wife was pregnant. By 31, he was diagnosed with stage 4 skin cancer that swiftly spread to his lymph nodes, bones, esophagus, and a few other places. He was told he had minimal chance of making it 5 more years. Even with the best health insurance money can buy, it still basically wiped him out. 7 years later, he's living a comfortable but not extravagant life as a civilian contractor for the Navy, same wife and 2 happy healthy kids, and spends most of his free time advocating for better public health care. Story 21. They're all stunning and wildly successful. One in particular was a crush with a similar name to mine dating back from my elementary school, which turned out to be the longest crush an entire decade I've ever had, and still appearing in a looping dream sequence to this day. Especially after that bitter and frankly traumatic rejection before we parted ways when I confessed to her. At that point, we were classmates for 5 years and were going to different schools. After the separation, that's when the dreams began, and every time I woke up, I'm feeling emotional all over again. Took me another painful 5 years before I stopped crushing on her, but the dreams never stopped. Just last week, I had an update to the dream sequence where we actually talked for the first time in a decade of Groundhog Day levels of dreams. I know, it's pathetic. Life updated it on that particular crush. She's currently aspiring to be an architect and had an equally cool boyfriend, so I doubt she ever looked back on her past as much as I do. I recently tried to follow her on her socials to get a life update from herself, but she won't accept my requests, so I won't gonna force her.